First off, thanks everyone for joining us today. So before I introduce Roger, let me also introduce myself really briefly. I'm Alessio D'Antino. I'm the founder and CEO of FoodTech. At FoodTech, we basically enable collaborations between corporates and startups in food and food tech, as we believe that collaboration can really make a difference in solving some of the biggest challenges that are affecting our food system. And so ultimately, through the Food Data Navigator, which is the platform that we built, the insights and the global food tech network of startups that we built over the years. Our mission is really to foster meaningful collaborations that can contribute to creating a brighter future of food. And so we are delighted to also have Roger today to tell us more about the incredible technologies that have developed at AeroFarms. But just to bring everyone up to speed, Roger is the CTO at AeroFarms, leading the R&D team to define algorithms that can optimize the quality and quantity of the leafy greens that they produce. He has got extensive experience in lighting, indoor agriculture, solar, military, and medical devices markets. But before I basically pass it to Roger, Roger, if you can just maybe introduce yourself really briefly. And for the ones who don't know about AeroFarms, what you guys do, if you can also please include like a little introduction of the company and your role within it.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for inviting me too. I'm really happy to be here. This is great to be able to shut my phone off for an hour and concentrate on talking about what I love best with people that I like too. This is great. And so to introduce AeroFarms. So AeroFarms has been growing in vertical farming market for 16 years, and we've matured from a typical startup. Like, I appreciate Forward Fooding's mission. We were a in the garage startup. We were in the dining room startup, working through the engineering questions of how best to bring the environments to these plants. We settled on aeroponics. Ended up giving us some fantastic benefits, and thus the name of the company is AeroFarms. Although today we certainly have scientists and engineers that are working with many different ways to grow plants. We have grown from that startup in the garage to renting small spaces, to putting units into schools, and now in Newark, New Jersey, we have 4 locations, including the one that is right behind me, where we are producing leafy greens and shipping them into supermarkets in our area, but also through internet grocery stores. And I'll talk some more about that when we talk about COVID-19 response every day of the week. Our products are both baby leafy greens and microgreens, and they are packaged as salad mixes, and even the microgreens we do as mixes too. And you'd find our products, like I said, at supermarkets, but to be specific, you'd find our product on internet at Fresh Direct, Amazon Fresh. You find us at Whole Foods and ShopRites and Ciabras, for example. My path with the company and my path in my career has been focused on high efficiency answers. And so in my background, I worked in the lighting industry. I made the most efficient lights to go onto the space station. I made the most efficient lights to redo the US Navy into LED lights. And I made the most efficient solar cells for special ops work for the military. And 10 years ago, actually 11 now, I started to help out with AeroFarms on the engineering side, because I believed in the mission of AeroFarms, and I saw the huge impact that getting it right in terms of the environmental conditions could make. And I also could see the curve of efficiency and cost for LEDs. And so we have a famous napkin where 11 years ago we mapped out what we expected to get from LEDs over time. And we saw that by 2017, the world should be our oyster. And we marched along to that, and we de-risked it along the way. And And lo and behold, 2017 hit. We were right where we needed to be from the point of view of the enabling technology of the LEDs to partner with the fundamental technology of how we grow our plants and how we use the aeroponics. And that put us in a great position.
Oh wow, that's actually I guess over 20 years of experience condensed into a minute and a half, I guess. And I guess it was a great transition for you, I guess, almost like a natural one, having been able to optimize, I guess, tech in also other industries, then lending, to AeroFarms and then applying all the knowledge and expertise actually to growing plants, in a hydroponics infrastructure.
Yeah,
Um, that's fantastic. Thanks a lot, Roger, for sharing that. Um, so my first question actually for you would be, as the number one globally ranked FoodTech company on the FoodTech 500 list, which is our attempt really to create a sort of a Fortune 500 for agri-food tech companies. We were curious about what the innovation actually looks like within AeroFarms. I know that you lead the R&D team, and so I would be really curious to hear what are actually the latest partnerships and innovation you've been working on since we actually last also spoken with your co-founder, Mark.
sure. So I'll talk about innovations first. The AeroFarms team and really leading any innovations team. The big question is how do you stay focused as a startup? My advice for startups is to pick one or two things and make sure you're focused on those, or I put it as make one or two big bets. So we have a broad team because we have a lot of inventing that we have to do to put up our next farm and the one after that. And so you'll find a team that includes plant scientists of every shape and color. You'll find engineers that are controls engineers, systems engineers, HVAC engineers, mechanical chemistry and chemical engineering both. And so we have a diverse team that is then focused on a particular challenge that has a lot of diverse aspects. And that's different than having a diverse team that's going to go after 100 individual problems and just chase those all the way down. I guess what I'm saying is that uh, the first question is just to make sure you've got a team that can hit all the bases, but understands that the focus is to move the whole system forward. And really, we have a systems engineering question. The kinds of innovations that we've been working on lately, they have a lot to do with um, uh, the the efficiency of the systems that we're using today, and also optimizing the level of the environmental control. There was a time when there was a time before fully controlled environment agriculture where we talked about temperature and humidity for an entire greenhouse. And there was a time at AeroFarms where we used to talk about temperature, humidity, light levels on average for wide swaths of a grown room like the one behind me. But step by step, we've been narrowing down the resolution of how tight we're controlling things and what are we measuring. So there's a lot of things that we're now measuring on every plant. Even though in this picture behind me, there's millions and millions, there's hundreds of millions of plants back there. Um, we're now actually zooming in, being able to take the data from individual plants, feed it back into system level decisions, and use that to keep our yields going up, keep our quality going up, and keep our customers satisfied. You also asked about partnerships. We're going to talk a little bit later probably about the Precision Indoor Plants partnership. But at AeroFarms, we another part of an innovation strategy for a startup is to be careful not to reinvent what someone else has, and to make sure that you are focused on problems that have market value. And so from that point of view, we look for partnerships both downstream in the supply chain, and typically that looks like people that would supply components or even raw materials into a vertical farming system. And we look for partners downstream too that are telling us what plants and what plant materials are most interesting to them. And we look for partnerships uh, where I want to see our partners be really happy that they're seeing results of either their component or results of the plants that we're delivering that are knocking the blocks off in terms of a quality level that they haven't seen before. We look both for public and private partnerships, excuse me. And a couple of them that we talked about publicly have to do with partnerships with groups that have the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research as a central member. One of those is a seeding solutions partnership where at AeroFarms we are working directly on how to improve vitamin content, flavor, shelf life, yield of leafy greens, baby leafy greens, microgreens even, by making some radical changes to the environment. And then another one we'll talk about a little later is a consortium called Precision Indoor Plants. And it has FAR as one of the members, really the anchor member, but it also has BASF, Benson Hill, Green Venus, which was in Trexon, Fluence, and Priva in that consortium too.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you guys work also very collaboratively with your partners, and you try to pull in, partners that can be complementary, but in some cases they may overlap also in the type of, I guess, solutions that they can provide to you to better innovate. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, and that's what I mean. That's the let me put a commercial for forward fooding. That's what I like about forward fooding, is that we're looking for how do we as a startup collaborate with larger companies, especially when we're talking about how can we do the most good? How can we do the most good with the technology that we've developed and make sure that we're getting the benefit of that into other people's hands? But as a startup, we've got to be careful. We've got to still only make those few bets. And so when we set up a partnership with another company, that's a way of that partner showing us, yeah, it's really worth it to make this investment because there's a direct need. And when they're talking through how things work on the market side, when they're talking through how their food scientists will evaluate it, they're really bending over backwards to to show us that there's a clear path for our innovation to make a big impact on the market.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Roger, for sharing that very openly as well, because it sounds like there is no hidden, I guess, agenda. Is all out there in the public domain when it comes to putting together all the partners, and then I guess you're assessing actually the benefits that you also bring into the partners, and not only how that specific partnership is actually contributing to the development of just new innovation, I guess, that AeroFarms can hone. Can you just maybe elaborate, as you also touched based on the fact that, and you stressed quite a lot that, as a startup, or as I guess fast growing, scale up at this point, you're still very conscious about the bets that you're making, right? Can you elaborate maybe a little bit more about the process that you guys have established to decide whether, to kill maybe a project or an innovation, or actually to continue growing it?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think that like for any CTO, that's the most important job. It's easy to start projects, but it's hard to stop them. And so like others, like we have a view of all the different directions we can go, and those are always exciting meetings where we talk through here at a technical level, at an engineering level, at a market level. Here's the different directions that the company could go with our technology. Um, we ask ourselves questions about how close is it to our core business today. We ask ourselves questions on, are we changing the market and the product at the same time? And if so, that's adding quite a bit of risk. And we sort back down to what are the kind of evolutionary steps that are close in market and offering to where we operate today. And then what are the one or two or three revolutionary steps that could really uh, change our capabilities and our technology and just open up whole new swaths of a market. Um, and 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 that's in the process of making sure which of those dozen of directions, revolutionary steps we could go, which ones have the best payoff. That's where we are talking with the market, and that's where we are seeking out partners that help us understand how our offerings would fit in the long run, 3 to 5 years out, for instance, and that's great for market intelligence. But the companies that have a forward vision, that have a multi-year plan, are often the ones that will then come back to us and say um, that they're interested in walking that path with us together. Uh, and uh, and we don't have all of the tools that they have in terms of evaluation. We have nowhere near as many tools as they have in terms of perhaps market access and evaluation too. And so that's why a partnership works well in that direction, and that helps to highlight which of those 1 to 3 make the most sense. Does that answer your question? I'm not
It
sure I did.
does. It does. It does. It does actually. I mean, it's a pretty, I guess, structured process at this point, as you've gone probably through different waves of innovation, and now you have also data points that allow you to actually decide whether to keep advancing in our project, or if he's not basically producing the results that you were expecting, I guess, to kill it. It is all, I guess, data driven all the way through,
Yeah,
right?
it is. It is. Thank you for that. So you're everything you said is right. The so you've got to make your decisions ahead of time. That's why my advice is like to use experiments, like structured experiments each step of the way. So when we start a project, we've got clear deliverables and milestones, and they're always lined up with what does it mean to get to commercialization. So it is every project, every partnership we take on is always lined up with commercialization, and we trim back some of the rabbit holes that people might want to dig down on, and make sure we establish feasibility and then optimize for a particular market. Um, so that's great at the beginning, and that lets you put to some black and white metrics on how are you going to know if this is still making sense. But then those turn into discrete experiments too, where any one phase might have 5 experiments in it. I'm making it up, but within that experiment, we make sure that the at the beginning we state the hypothesis clearly. We're very clear on what does success look like from this experiment, and then that way, as we march through, we make sure that we're getting the science correct and lined up with the key questions that need to be answered, and not repeating the science a second or third time because we weren't quite positive what success was going to look like.
Fantastic. Thanks, thanks, Roger. That really answers then my question, because I added, I guess, another bit to it, but I was sure that you guys used data all the way through. So
Yeah,
thanks, actually, for just providing some examples to back that up. We're going to move to COVID-19, is a topic that I guess cannot be taken out from any of this conversation. And so I think, you know, the global pandemic really has created the spotlight on the food supply production, right? And all the fragility that actually the supply chain has right now. Then can you please talk about how supply chain disruption, can you talk about the supply chain disruption that you guys have experienced, and how you guys at AeroFarms actually have innovated through the disruption?
sure. So I'm happy to. And I'm also proud of AeroFarms in terms of how we've been able to respond and make sure that we're still doing the most good with with our plans. And so a few things. We all have seen food supply disruption. On top of, there already was this layer of geopolitical questions where in the ag space, people were having a tough time getting labor where it needed to be at the right times. And so it's been a couple, 3 years of that layer of disruption built in. And we've seen some companies have some tough times uh, uh, with that to start with. And then when you layer on top of it COVID, where you have farms where all of the farm workers are testing positive for COVID. You've got places where people can't cross borders due to quarantine, and so companies are emptying out their accountants into the field and having them do some of the picking to keep things going. And that's not quite sustainable. Those kind of heroic efforts are going to be tough in the long run, and definitely we already see issues with supply. At AeroFarms, we've been able to step up with our production, and what we've seen is a big shift into more online sales. So the demand there has gone up. That shouldn't be surprising to anybody on this call. So a lot more people are using the online grocery stores. It took me a month to talk my parents into this. My mom just kept going to the grocery store, and it took me a month for her to convince her she needs to stay home and have it delivered. And when people go to an internet grocery store, so I'll use my mom as an example. So she felt she needed to go because why? She needed to make sure there weren't brown spots on the bananas, make sure there wasn't mold on the strawberries, make sure there wasn't that kind of brown glop at the bottom of her package of leafy greens. And so what we've seen is because AeroFarms delivers the highest quality and the longest shelf life, we're able to give people confidence when they receive that box of groceries that they didn't need to go through and hand pick to find the right package of greens because it's consistent and high quality. And so we're getting that feedback from the market that they appreciate this, and it's definitely helping my mom, others feel comfortable with the grocery shopping remote through COVID, and I think it's going to stick around. I think it's going to be. I think that grocery shopping is going to stick around after COVID has disappeared.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Roger, also for using, I guess, your mom as an example to explain again how, fragile, I guess, the supply chain has been, but also how, I guess, consumers' preferences or, kind of sticking to what they're used to is still, in a way, kind of influencing, their purchasing habits. Although, as you said, once you prove that they can actually get the same quality, if not better, then they might be keen to actually, give it a go. But I guess it takes a little bit of time, especially during these times, to go out there and kind of take the risk of not knowing where you're purchasing, right?
That's right.
And can you actually talk more on a technical level? We talked about the supply chain and how, I guess, fragile was, but can you actually talk about the reliability and the resiliency of the supply chain within a controlled environment agriculture, and particularly the technology that you guys have built at AeroFarms?
Sure. So I think that COVID or not, by shortening the supply chain, you end up with a far more resilient system. Where in this room behind me, everything happens. So seeds come in and packaged goods go out. And when they go out, they don't have to drive very far. So here in Newark, New Jersey, we're able to quickly get it into our customers' hands. And in addition to the fact that the product, like for like, lasts longer because of how we handle it and how we grow it, it's also 3 or 4 days fresher as it gets into a customer's hands. The and so I guess it's a long way of saying local pays off when you're talking about COVID, or you're talking about responses in trying times, because you're not trying to bring labor in, you're not trying to push product out, you're not trying to drive it across the country into a situation where you don't know what's going to happen at the cold storage when you get there, because everything is in such a heightened state of chaos. Um, and so I guess, the long story short is local. I'm not sure I answered the question you're after there, Alessio.
Yeah. No, you did. I guess what I wanted also you to touch base on was how basically in a controlled environment, right? How can you actually make sure that the supply chain is even more resilient than the usual one, if you will, given that you can actually control the environment.
Yeah, that's true. So it's when you walk into this grow room, it's the same environment every day. It's the same tasks that have to be done every day. So there's no seasonality to it. You're not worrying about bringing up a big staff. You're not worrying about have you just moved your machines down to Yuma and did they get bolted in the floor in time? It's always the same when you show up. And so that helps tremendously with resiliency, to the point where like sometimes I just take it for granted. But it's a key benefit for how we're able to bring our high quality product to the customers every day. And then at the science level, because we are so clean, right? We're not worried about the bird droppings. We're not worried about issues with human contamination. And so on a day by day basis, we can process the plants in a very simple way, because we're not having these concerns about external environmental problems.
Fantastic. So basically you can manage your own supply chain as well in a controlled environment, as opposed to, I guess, getting affected by the externalities of it.
Oh yeah,
including, I guess,
control our own density.
That's awesome. In our last chat, actually, with Mark, we talked about also AeroFarms' involvement in the Precision of Indoor Plants project with the government of Abu Dhabi. I know that you've been leading actually that project. Can you actually tell us a bit more about this partnership and what you guys are working on?
Yeah, there's two projects in there. So there was an announcement last month from the government in Abu Dhabi, where they're committed to being leaders in the region and definitely in the world for ag tech. And so they talked about a series of investments that they're making to increase the amount of technology flowing through the country. And AeroFarms is proud to be part of that. AeroFarms' vision in Abu Dhabi is to to partner with companies and universities in the region, in the country, and also bring in experts from around the world in order to solve problems that have to do with automation, data analysis, and more efficient ways to grow. Really, we're setting up a R&D facility that's every bit as large as what's behind me, and lets us bring the world's best minds to work on it in Abu Dhabi. And so that's a broad stroke answer, because we have a broad stroke vision for making sure we've got all the right tools to be able to take the same science and engineering that we've been doing in Newark, New Jersey, and do it at 3 times or 5 times the scale in Abu Dhabi. So it's supercharging our ability to innovate. There's also a project called Precision Indoor Plants. And Precision Indoor Plants, or PIP, is a consortium between AeroFarms, and then I mentioned the companies earlier, AeroFarms, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, BASF, in Trexon, now called Green Venus, Benson Hill, Fluence, and Priva. Those are some international names. It's an international consortium where we are focused on how do you co-optimize genetics and environment? So just take a step back. A lot of the history at AeroFarms has been as vertical farming worked its way up the relevancy ladder, right, and grew volume and showed people that this is the right direction. So as we were marching through that, we were sort of at the mercy in the genetics side, meaning that we took the seeds that we could get because the volume wasn't there yet for breeders to focus on this market. And so a lot of the environmental work that we did was using those common seeds. And we've done fantastic with that. So our customers in the supermarkets, our customers in all other markets are very happy with what we're delivering. We're really pleased with the quality of the germplasm that we get, and we're able to turn that into a really high quality product. But now, instead of just optimizing the environment without thinking about how do we get better germplasm, the PIP project looks at both the genetics and the environment at the same time. So we're co-optimizing. That's the name of the game. And so the players that I just mentioned, that's kind of the world's all-star team for breeding in the segments that we're after here, and we're proud to be working with them and to be part of that team. We're doing some of the work in Newark, New Jersey. We're doing some of the work in Abu Dhabi in order to bring these different plants forward. The ones that have been announced are lettuce, tomatoes, strawberries, blueberries, and cilantro. And so you're going to be hearing a lot more from us on that over the next 6 months as we go through a few more stage gates and we all agree together to go public with a few more interesting facts.
Fantastic, Roger. And can you actually tell us also a bit more about how these partnerships actually came about? I mean, I guess, multi-stakeholder partnerships are never easy to handle, right? But can you maybe give us a bit about the genesis? I'm just curious really to hear how did this all started? Was the government of Abu Dhabi noticing what you guys were doing, I guess, in the market and reaching out? And then out of that, I guess, first request, then you put together other partners to make it happen?
Yes. So let me break the two pieces up again. So for precision indoor plants, so I'll credit the FAR team and Dr. Sally Rocky specifically. When we were talking about our first steps with FAR, she said, "I've coined a new term, precision indoor plants," and that's has grown into a whole this whole project. And FAR with Sally, also with Dr. John Reich, has been key for putting together kind of the base team. They took care of some of the first convening. They brought together different members of the team that could kind of cover some of the different bases. We all met and laid out some of the structure of what we hope would come out of it. But AeroFarms and others, we didn't have the staff to do all of the team building, and FAR went a long way with that. And FAR is also funding a very large chunk of it. And so I credit FAR for doing, the lion's share of pulling together the PIP team. For Abu Dhabi, so they've announced their shift to investing more in technology, and actually had announced very specifically with ag tech what they wanted to do, and set goals for 2021, some goals for 2022, 2023, and then they turned to the world and explained their ideas. And we talked with them early and often about how we felt that AeroFarms technology could contribute to their vision, and and they agreed. And a big part of that was um, their confidence that AeroFarms is focused on making a big impact with the technology in broad strokes, and I think that had a lot to do with their decision to partner with us.
Fantastic. So it's really about, I guess, taking the lead and also developing some of these cutting edge technologies, and then getting, I guess, the different stakeholders to notice that and being wanting, to be part of it, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. You put it really succinctly. Thank you.
Great. And building on actually this, and as you've been speaking, we've been receiving dozens of questions, which is going to be a quite of a daunting task to select, the ones that are going to fire at you later. But can you maybe touch based on the next phase of innovation and technological development in AeroFarms, and how does it look like?
Yeah, I think that um, uh, my answer there goes right back to this co-development of genetics and environment. So early on, you asked me about what innovations we're working on at AeroFarms, and it has a lot to do with the better environmental control, more efficient ways to get the most bang for our buck from every photon that we deliver, and also how we use the data stream in order to feed back in to our systems. And it's all about better and better resolution of the data. But then I just mentioned that we could take those same tools, and instead of taking what we get for germplasm and genetics, we could be optimizing at the same time. And we already have taken a few very successful steps here, and we actually have worked hand in hand to co-develop a green that you're going to see coming from us later on this year, as a pilot for this whole project, and it's worked really well. Where we were surprised at some of the tweaks that we could make with the environment that would go right hand in hand with the genetics. To put it another way, when you are unfettered from having to worry about downy mildew protection or drought resistance, you find that the geneticists are really excited about what they can do with the plant, how they can breed it and really elaborate the flavors and focus on the aspects that give you very long shelf life. Uh, and uh, and then on our side, um, a lot of these plants and the way that they're growing, a few differences in terms of the photon ratios can make a big difference in these plants. And if we decide together that we're going to tune the environment at the same time that we're breeding for some specific traits, you end up with extremely productive plants that have a quality that no one's ever seen before, because no one's ever been able to grow it this way before.
Wow, sounds like the possibilities are endless, but we're going to leave it there with a little bit of suspense as well before you guys make the public announcement, and we'll keep our eyes peeled for that. I'm mindful of time. I just want to ask you one very last question before opening up to the Q&A. We work also with several companies as they lead innovation in the food tech world. But why would you say innovation is still important during this time, and how can companies continue to innovate given the changing economic outlook, as well as, I guess, the budgets that they're working with?
Sure, I'm a big believer in this. I've lived it before. So if you take a look at, excuse me, um, coming out of the 2008, and how companies innovated and expanded through 2009, 2010, you saw certainly companies that looked for bargains in terms of M&A as ways to complement their internal R&D. But I think that the companies that still had a view of 2 to 5 years out, the companies that had confidence that the recession wasn't going to last forever, we're the ones that were able to attract and hold the talent. We're able to kind of then grow and actually cherry pick from other companies and consolidate the best talent in the world in their companies. And then we're able to take advantage of the fact that that innovation marches on. I'm already seeing it. So I'm seeing two classes of companies just in the leaders that I talk to. I do see some that are hunkering down um, and they're really worried for where innovation is going to come from and how they're going to hold their leadership position 2 to 5 years out. And I see some companies that are thinking, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that my neighbor's hunkering down and I'm going to grab that leadership position. So I see it in the casual chats with other CTOs and CEOs all the time right now.
Interesting. And how do you think actually companies can really innovate? Also, I guess working with constrained budgets. I mean,
Yeah.
is it like incremental or is it like leapfrogging? Where would you, I guess, put your bets on if you were
So
to work, in a bit of very constricted, I guess, budget?
there's two answers there. So one is it's company to company collaborations, I think, are going to be the name of the game for the next 18 months. That I think that my friends at universities are having a tough time kind of figuring out when are they starting again, what can they start again. I have friends at universities where all the plants are gone. And so when they're allowed back in, they're going to be starting from scratch. That's it's a big loss to just to the cycle of innovation right now. It's certainly a loss for them individually, and it's a loss for our market in plant science, part of ag tech, for sure. And so with this big question mark floating over those universities, I think we're going to see the most successful companies are going to be the ones that are listening to you, are listening in and thinking through who else out there is raising their hand, ready to collaborate and keep the train on track. So I think collaboration is the key, and communication is going to be key. And we're at a point where communication is tough. At AeroFarms, we sometimes we say that we want to lead from the podium, and we're going to make sure that we are at the right ag tech events to be able to find like-minded people that are open for collaboration and external innovation. But it's been tough to, of course, we haven't lately, and part of why I appreciate being invited to talk to you here.
Thank you, Roger. Really, really appreciate that. And I guess we live in brief collaboration as an organization, and I can't really agree more with you that, sometimes you really need to, I guess, um, leave the grip on, honing that IP and further developing, internally your own innovation, and really, kind of embrace that, collaboration can lead you to longer term also benefits. Although, you might be sharing your IP with another organization, or even, co-creating, with them and creating, new opportunities for both businesses. But I guess, it boils down to company's DNA after all, right? So as you also said earlier, one thing that also resonated with me a lot is the fact that, keeping the talent, especially during, these tough times, is probably the key to then being able to innovate in the long haul. Because after all, innovation is done by people, and without, the right talent, you won't be able to really be ahead of your competitors either. So thanks a lot, really, for sharing that. I'm glad to hear, that we're not the only one, if you will, that we try to foster, collaboration within this industry. Fantastic. Go. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that's why I think this is a great hour, because I do agree with your mission. I do think that this is going to be far more important over the next 12 months than the last 12 months.
Yeah. Very, very much agree. So I have now been given this really tough task of cherry picking the questions. And please bear with me, you know, if I don't pick yours, but again, we have some time constraints. So I'm going to start with one from Diana, who's asking, have AeroFarms ever considered growing tree saplings to migrate climate change?
Yeah, so that is on our minds. Um, I have to be careful how I answer it. So give me a second. The way I want to answer it is that for using indoor farms, vertical farms, to help, whether it's a sapling or a plant, get started indoors is a great way to get a plant um, uh, in its best position to go outdoors. This is especially important when you're talking about going into harsher environments. So when you're talking about very arid environments, when you're talking about places that might have salt stress, getting that plant to be extremely healthy at 6 weeks or 6 months, so it's got the best chance of establishing, is I think a critical tool for bringing plants into some special areas. Um, we we have been doing some research in these lines. We not only for the idea of what plants go into what areas, but people have questions on their minds of, as climate changes, where am I going to go with this particular plant or sapling, like you mentioned? Where am I going to be going in 20 years? And if the choice isn't obvious, we can work with people on making sure that in trying different environments and trying different situations, both for at the sapling level and older, to show that this plant could fit into this new region of the world, and especially if you start it on an aero farm, it will thrive there.
Fantastic. Thanks, Roger. I'm going to bundle up two questions, but effectively the core of the question is AeroFarm considering other crops other than salad greens and microgreens that they're currently growing?
So certainly we are. So that's just in the spirit of this being like an innovation talk. I think that when we talk about baby greens and microgreens, that's when I was talking about evolutionary steps. I think we've led the way in these evolutionary steps in terms of better and better quality for those greens. But then when we think of revolutionary steps, where we're thinking about, I'll use saplings because Diana mentioned that. So maybe we're deciding that we're going to go in the direction of saplings, and we understand the technology steps to get to having a whole business built around saplings. Those are the like I said, 1, 2, 3 revolutionary steps that as a small business you've got to make sure it's not 100, and make sure that each one of those is leading to a commercial business.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. So is there, I guess, a lot of test and trial as well, right? One more question from actually Anna, who's asking, how do you manage the packaging for your production? And are you giving a preference to sustainable and biodegradable or recyclable packaging substrates?
Yeah, and I'd love to talk to you more about that. This is an area where I think that AeroFarms is looking for the best answers in terms of the best way to do our packaging. Today we package in a plastic container. We use a film as the cover for the clamshell, so we don't have a top cover on our clamshell. That film helps us cut down the plastic use. But I still suspect there's ways that we could innovate and do even better with that packaging. And we're all ears here in terms of understanding best practices and are open to migrate in the right direction.
Fantastic. I wasn't sure whether you were also looking at the packaging side of it, but it sounds like you do. So
Yeah.
fantastic. Um, there is a technical question, I guess, from Dr. Data Kakade. How much maximum vertical layer you can grow for cultivation? As in your picture, I guess he has been counting actually literally the layers stuck upon you. Is there is 12 layers as of now.
Right. So we haven't found that limit yet. So we're seeing we're able to go beyond 12. Like the farm you're seeing behind me, um, that's sort of the 2016 level of technology. It still works fantastically, but we've gone far beyond that as we are setting up our next farm. And we've added more levels, and we really haven't hit that upper limit in terms of how many levels to add. The type of plant, of course, matters. So shorter plants, you can put more levels into a given building, and taller plants, like if we went for saplings, like Diana mentioned, we probably have more space above there. And so um, I'm sorry, that may not be a perfect answer to your question, but uh, we haven't found a limit yet.
The number yet.
Yeah.
I guess is as any, I guess, cutting edge innovations, there are a few bits that are still remains to be unanswered, and that's probably why
Right.
your role is so important also in heading up these projects. um Building on that, Samir is asking, how successful are you commercially compared to traditional farming methods?
Right. So Samir, that's a great question. So our products sell they go head to head with traditional products. So they go head to head on the grocery store shelves, on the internet shelf, with products that are grown in Salinas Valley and trucked across the country. And um, our best customers are the ones who have tried it and recognized a step change in quality, and they come back again and again and again. We've seen our customers start us out as kind of a second position, move us to a first position, move us to like a unique position in the offerings. So I think that quality is really the name of the game for how AeroFarms differentiates day after day. That said, when my mom walks through, I'm sure she's looking at that price. And so we also compete right there on the price level. And you need that to get into the cart the first time. And then we find that people come back again and again based on the quality.
Fantastic. Thanks, Roger. I'm gonna take one more because I'm mindful of time. I know you have a really busy schedule, so I'll just take one more. How long does it take to clear a project according to the milestone you mentioned, like formally and with formal and discrete experiments?
Sure, good question. So sometimes the answer there is the faster you go, the longer it takes. Where so doing your homework up front and making sure that you've got a solid plan, boy, it sometimes chafes me, right? Because I want to go, but it always pays off. So there's the first 80% where we're making sure that we are set up and we've got the plan set. We know what our questions are. We know how we're going to take the data. And then there's the second 80% where we're growing the plans and pulling in the results. Um, there's no great answer there in terms of how long it takes. That has a lot to do with the life cycle of the plants. So if I wanted to walk out here and change the lights for some of these for some arugula, it's got a life cycle of 2 to 3 weeks, and we'd be pulling the data off there relatively quickly. But if we're talking about a longer life plant or something where engineering changes have to be made in order to get me the environmental shift I'm looking for, it'll certainly be months. So I'm sorry, there's no great answer, no fast answer for that one.
I guess it varies from project to project, right, as well. So, and from the testing, I guess, period the project has been incubated on. Fantastic, Roger. Thank you so much for joining us today, for such a great interview, and for sharing, really openly also your experience, the working on this technology, and also what are the next developments of it. In solving it, the agriculture supply chain, also through strategic partnerships. So we wish you and the AeroFarms team all the best for the coming months. I guess we start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not sure how that looks like in your R&D lab, but and we started to see that the market is kind of getting back to normality, or whatever normality means these days. And we'll watch with interest, all your further developments. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for the high quality of the questions. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Roger. You have a great day. Talk to you soon.